Hello, hello, it's Mr. Grow, and welcome to our video on McCarthyism. Does a meme stop being funny once a teacher does it? Probably. But you know what? That's Mr. Grow, just doing his best to be hip with the youth. Anyways, let's get into it. I'm gonna first show you guys a video from my good friend from the History Channel to give you guys, a little overview, and then we'll break it down after that. So without further ado, here it is.
Hi, this is Uhuru Williams. I'm a historian, and here's what you need to know in order to sound smart about Joseph McCarthy. During the 1940s and 1950s, many Americans worried about the prospects of communism rearing its head within the United States. Republican Senator Joseph McCarthy from Wisconsin was one of the key political figures to capitalize on these fears. In 1950, he gave a salacious speech in Wheeling, West Virginia, in which he claimed to have evidence of 250 communists active in the United States Department of State. Despite the lack of evidence corroborating McCarthy's claims, he nevertheless continued to captivate the American public for the next 5 years. During this period, McCarthy hurled allegations that well-known authors, activists, and government officials were actually traitors and communist sympathizers. This was known as red baiting, and often consisted of McCarthy hurling allegations of suspected communist involvement and forcing people to respond and to defend their innocence, even though they had not been proven guilty. It's not until McCarthy turned his attention to the United States Army in 1954 that his reign of terror came to an end and he was censured by the United States Senate. The American people were treated to the full terror of McCarthyism after the Army hearings were televised. In an infamous exchange during those televised hearings, in which McCarthy attacked a young Army officer, the Army's chief counsel thundered at the senator, "Have you no sense of decency, sir?" which encapsulated the turn against McCarthy in this period. By the time the televised Army hearings ended, McCarthy lost much of his popular support. He died in 1957, just a short time later, at the age of 48.
Thanks, Uhuru. Couldn't have said it better myself. So let's do a little bit of a recap here and go over the basics. So in the 1950s in the US, there's a ton of paranoia about communism. This, of course, stemmed from fear of the USSR and the fear of spies from the USSR. Right? It's like that game Among Us. We were always looking for the imposter, the communist in sheep's clothing, if you will. Only instead of in Among Us, it's just a video game, the consequences were real. People went to jail. People's lives were ruined. This was not good. And as you heard in the video, all this was really spearheaded, or at least he was the loudest voice for this, Senator McCarthy. But he didn't act alone. Really, he got a lot of people on board, bureaucrats, journalists, politicians, really anyone who was in a position to accuse anyone else of being a communist. And oh boy, it was easy to be accused of being a communist. They would go after people, because they liked certain types of art, they had a diverse group of friends, they opposed the use of nuclear weapons. These are normal things. Under these criteria, I would be considered a communist. I like art, I have a diverse group of friends, I generally oppose the use of nuclear weapons. So, yeah, you can see just how frantic and paranoid people were. How did this work, you might be asking? Well, the FBI began hunting down suspected communists and tried to eliminate their influence, right? Basically the 50s equivalent to deplatforming them. They wanted to take away their ability to turn other Americans into communists. And this suspicion and hunting was not unique to the FBI, though. Movie studios did this, businesses, schools, even Congress. That's right, they formed the House Un-American Activities Committee, and we're going to talk more about that on Thursday, but just know that they grilled people, again, for being pretty normal, not really out of the ordinary, certainly not communist most of the time. And people who were convicted in these kind of, phony trials were fired from their jobs and blacklisted, meaning they really couldn't get a job anywhere else in the industry. And I'm sure you can imagine that, that would ruin someone's life if you just ended their career. Imagine if you were like an actor for 20 years or, you were a chemist for 20 years. And all of a sudden you lose your job because someone said that you had a vaguely communist-looking piece of art on your walls. It'd be terrifying. Fortunately, though, the reign of terror of McCarthyism didn't last forever. McCarthy ended up flying too close to the sun, and for those of you who are not up to speed on your Greek mythology, really that means he got a little bit too ambitious, right? So he lost support when he went after the military. And typically, criticisms of the military don't resonate well with most Americans, especially if your criticism of the military or of military officials is largely baseless, as were the accusations of being communist. And so these run-ins with the military eventually led to McCarthy being censured by the Senate. And what that means is that he was publicly and formally condemned by the Senate. And he pretty much lost all of his influence. And he actually died shortly after that. And that doesn't mean that McCarthyism was over, though. I mean, it was formally over, like the movement was largely over. But it never really went away. It left lasting scars on this country. It ruined lives and it narrowed the political spectrum drastically. Right? Because think about it, if under McCarthyism you said anything vaguely socialist, you'd be branded as a communist and your life would be ruined. And what's more is that the Supreme Court during a lot of McCarthyism looked the other way, and that set a bad precedent for the future. It left the door open to other scapegoating and paranoia like this. You guys weren't alive, but, shortly after 9/11, there were shades of McCarthyism style paranoia about, well, who's a terrorist? And so this is why it's so important that we need to know about McCarthyism, that we need to be aware so we can check ourselves. And so I know this video is a review for a lot of you that were in class today, but it doesn't hurt to learn this stuff twice because it really is important. And you know what's coming. I'm about to sound like a broken record. We are all active participants in this democracy, and we all need to be informed of our history and informed of the mistakes that we have made so that we can vote for a better future. And on that lovely note, that is the end of this video. Have a good rest of your, I was going to say have a good rest of your day, but you could be watching this at night. So I guess bye.